Hello and welcome. You're watching Greenwich live session, and this is your host Umar Khan, and I'm back with another program, another guest, and let me introduce my very special guest for today. We have with us Dr. Nadeem Malik, who is the professor in the School of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Melbourne, Australia. His research specialization includes third world development, globalization, gender and development, governance, civil society and the state, decentralization, project and program management and monitoring and evaluation of development projects, anthropology of development. And he's not just associated with academics only, he is also a professional artist with an honors degree in fine arts from the National College of Art, Lahore. He is also the author of several books and research publications. So, a very warm welcome to Dr. Nadeem Malik. Hello, sir. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm very well. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for taking out time. And our next guest for today is Mr. Ali Jillani. And let me tell you a bit about Mr. Ali Jillani. He is the head of diplomatic affairs at Greenwich University. And that's not all. Ali is a decolonialist and a development policy analyst. He has made several interventions at the regional and global level on human rights, neoliberal corporatocracies, multilateral diplomacy, diplomatic governance, and sustainable development. He has represented Pakistan at various global forums, including the High Level Political Forum of the UN and the European Parliament. And we're really proud to have both of these gentlemen with us. So, welcome to the show, Ali. How are you? Ali, can you hear me? Ali, can you hear me? Hello, can Dr. Nadeem, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I think Ali has some issues with the technical aspect. So we'll get back to Ali, of course. So, Doctor, how is everything going on in Australia right now? We all know we're in the COVID situation. So, how have you been spending all of the time?
Yeah. In fact, I was in the UK and then I was stranded in Pakistan. Situation in Australia is pretty in control. I think there's not been any COVID-19 case in the last 24 or 48 hours. So yeah, they're doing very well. I think.
Absolutely. And how have you been spending your time, of course, because we all know that life in itself overall has been affected. So, any changes to your life or routine?
Yeah, look, I'm quite used to be with myself, so it was not that boring. I had a lot of time to read and write, and then I am a musician. I practiced my musical instrument, so it was all right. It was fine.
Right. We all know that you're an artist and you have that artistic side. We will be touching that, of course. But today, basically our topic is pandemic is a promise for people and the planet over profit. So we'll be discussing different aspects of it. So Ali, how are you? Can you hear me now?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, I'm
Right. Welcome. As you all know that we're live, so when we are live, there are some technical glitches. So I apologize to the audience for that. Ali, how have you been spending all your time during this COVID-19?
uh, well, it's been difficult, of course. I mean, being locked down inside, but because of the work, I mean, since we've shifted online, so it's been so far so good, and a lot of time for reading stuff. So yeah.
So I'm actually very excited today because I've got two gentlemen, and this discussion would be so intellectual and such a treat to watch and hear for the audience. Ali, what would you like to say on the our topic today? Pandemic is a promise for people and the plan to over profits.
I think it's a great topic because you see governments around the world, I mean, have this renewed emphasis from, say, spending in defensive expenditures. I'll just share a few statistics and then I'll try to loop in Docsab in the discussion. So as far as 2019 is concerned, we had these CIPRI statistics where the United States spent almost like $730 billion in its defense. You had China at number one, which was $261 billion. Then you had the likes of Russia around 73, $74 billion. And then we had the likes of India and Saudi Arabia at fourth and fifth with 65 and $62 billion in defensive expenditures and weapons. As far as the pandemic being a promise is concerned, this is basically the major shift in the entire political economy, in the entire emphasis as far as the governance around the world is concerned. So what's happening now is the pandemic has shifted your focus from defensive expenditures towards expenditure in, say, education, expenditure in health, expenditure in standard of living. And this is pretty much what the civil society had been campaigning for last few decades. But there wasn't that stimulus, which could turn the tables around. And pandemic in that way has pretty much reshaped the entire discussion around the world. So would also like to hear from Docsab as to what he feels, I mean, how he sees the shift in the political economy around the world.
Yes, Dr. Saab, your view on this?
I don't think there's any significant shift in political economy of the world, but this pandemic has surely brought to focus certain very important questions which have not been addressed so far. But I think we can't sort of ascribe a certain kind of agency to pandemic that this is because of coronavirus, as if coronavirus is some conscious entity which will bring some change. It will depend on and that is something we have yet to see. To what extent it has really brought to focus could sort of appeal to the conscience of global policymakers to bring certain more meaningful change and more sort of humane political economy regime. So let's wait and see what happens.
You see this nonetheless as a wake-up call, right?
It is a wake-up call, definitely. It is a wake-up call, yeah.
So, Ali, we have two different views on the same scenario. What do you personally think that, because this pandemic is affected globally, not just Pakistan, and every country, every continent has its whole different scenarios. So, looking at it on a wider perspective, how do you see the future post-COVID?
I think life as we know it is going to be completely changed. I mean, sticking to our topic, as far as the social, political, and economic side of things is concerned, this could bring about certain perspectives, like I mean, Docsab also alluded to, which might turn the tables as far as global policy making processes are concerned. For instance, I mean, just one of the examples like IMF, these international lending institutions, the likes of IMF, there's this global institute, Jubilee Institute in London. So they're campaigning right now as we speak in terms of writing off the debts of developing countries around the world. Because the economy is going to be completely changed after this pandemic. It already has dented a lot of countries around the world. So it could be a different ball game altogether.
Absolutely, and we've seen the switches and the change of strategies from different countries and different business scenarios. Dr. Nadeem, what would you like to say on this post-COVID? How will be businesses and people, everyone reacting regarding to the socio-economic scenarios?
Definitely, the focus is shifting more towards better health infrastructure and environment, protecting environment, sustainable development, meaning that whatever we do today, we have to take care of the future of future generations as well. uh, and then education. These are some of the sort of concerns which have become very very pivotal now. Uh, I think it will all depend on how taxpayers in developed world, what kind of pressure they are able to build, and what kind of changes they are able to bring in the global economic policy and policies at the national level as well. So taxpayers in developed countries and the ruling elites in developing countries, it will depend how they react in or how what kind of decisions they take in post pandemic situation. Right now, I wouldn't sort of you know predict anything. Is so Situation is so fluid. It's uncertainty is all over. So you can't sort of predict a definite future. But I think the main concern now is, or the main change that we can see now is that there are certain questions like inequality, as Adi Jillani mentioned, like issues of health infrastructure. We have seen that health infrastructure, even in most developed countries, was not adequate enough to deal with such health hazards. So the focus has changed. It has become on these crucial aspects of human survival. But and the pandemic has certainly raised uh, certain very important questions globally. But you can't be too sure about predicting, what will be the post-pandemic situation. I think it will all depend. Civil society is not strong enough globally to bring any meaningful change, I think. But taxpayers' pressures in developed world and the political will of ruling elites in developing countries, these are two main variables that would matter, I think, post
Right.
and bring meaningful change in post-pandemic situation.
Absolutely. Ali, I'll come to you on this. Absolutely, we have no clue what the future holds, how long this is going to take, how the world will react, and will once we come back to normal, will life will be normal or it will be different. Keeping all that in mind, what is your view on Dr. Nadeem's comments?
I think I agree with Dr. Saab. I mean, let me just contextualize the statistics that we already spoke about. He said, like, I mean, these are two variables. So when you talk about the taxpayers' pressure as an active civic infrastructure around the world, for communities around the world, then that the impetus for that pressure is already there. For instance, I mean, we spoke about the United States spending about $730 billion on defense. It is one of the hardest hit countries as far as this particular pandemic is concerned. Then you talk about China, where you had like about $260 billion. This is where it started. Now the two countries, as far as their GDP and economic size is concerned, I mean, there's this tremendous potential. But the problem is, both of them were not good enough in terms of their health infrastructures. They were not ready enough to deal with this kind of a pandemic. I see two concerns right now. Number one, we don't have a definitive end line as far as this particular pandemic is concerned. Number two, there's no definitive answer as to whether there will be many more to come. This is just one, and it's shaking the entire global infrastructure once and for all, right? When you come to number three, which is Russia, around like $71 billion in defense. I mean, you don't even get the statistics from Russia, right? I mean, there's this very low score of cases reported from there. I mean, speaking to a couple of friends, what I've come to know, there's snatching going on the streets as far as Russia is concerned. People are already starving. So this could also be a pandemic of hunger beyond pandemic of a health perspective. So these are also some of the questions too. Then you come down to Saudi Arabia and the likes of India. I mean, India could be talking about, say, millions of people displaced who've already been thrown out of the cities, who used to be daily wagers, right? So this could pretty much be a pandemic of hunger moving forward if this emphasis is not renewed, if there's no equitable financing as far as health, education, and standard of living is concerned. So in a way, this wake-up call has to, substantiate into policy action. Of course, I mean, mobilized by the impotence of that political pressure that Dr. Saab spoke as far as the taxpayers are concerned.
Absolutely right. And of course, we also have comments with us, and we'll be including that as well. But before that, Dr. Saab, you have also specialized in the third world countries development. So, taking Ali's point, of course, there's also the scenario that people are dying of hunger and they're taking drastic measures of coming to crime and everything else. So, how can we and how can the government and organizations take care of that factor? Because people are getting affected in huge numbers.
Look, in developing countries, there are millions of people who die every year out of ordinary, curable diseases like malaria, waterborne diseases, and nobody was ever bothered in developing countries. Still, I don't see any proactive approaches within most developing countries. So it will all depend on now the change. I think still in post-pandemic situation, the change might come from abroad, from first world, because this kind of pandemic, if in future again takes rebirth within developing countries, it is globalized. It can easily cross borders and affect everyone. So maybe global governance probably has more role or might be more instrumental in dealing with this issue within developing countries as well. I'm not very hopeful that developing countries on their own would be able to, who are absolutely debt prone. They're dealing with massive debts. They're dealing with so many problems. They don't have enough resources. So to what extent they can do on their own, of course, if the political will is there, which I don't see right now, then they can make some difference. But of course, but this has to be a collaborative effort, and I think the call probably will come or has to come from the first world. They
Right.
have, they have resources. They can cancel the debts. They are scared of their own living standards, going down because of these pandemics, and if they are concerned that this is, if they are conscious, which they are, I think that this is quite an integrated world, and something happens in one part of the world can impact on the other part, and in the era of globalization, no, unlike the colonial period, one part of the world cannot develop at the expense of the other part. You have to sort of give something back to that part of the world as well. So that giving something back, to what extent and what will be the volume of that giving back to developing world will matter a lot, I think.
Right. I see Ali smiling. I think he has something in mind. Ali, taking this point, of course, we are expecting change from the first world countries, but this pandemic has caused huge disasters. Even with the giants like USA, they were even short of beds. We've seen Italy; they're known for their medical industry, but even they struggled. So, of course, when we talk about first world countries struggling, of course, the developing countries even don't stand a chance. What would you like to say about it?
I'll just touch base first on what Dr. Dogsab said about the colonial aspect of things. I mean, being a decolonialist myself, the emphasis has to be on fairness as far as the retribution is concerned, because there have been like centuries of plunder which has been perpetual, and as far as neo-imperialism is concerned, the same pattern of that plunder continues through multinational corporations, which happen to be one of the key reasons of where we are today in terms of environmental degradation in particular. Plus, I think we also need to focus on changing the terms of discussion. So, Docsop talked about the capacity of the first world to help the third world. I would rather take it to the responsibility of the first world to tackle the situation for the third world also. I would rather emphasize that as far as the Paris Agreement was concerned on the environment, it had a particular instrument which was CBDRRC. This was common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So we are talking about the capability of the first world to finance and then provide that technology transfer, provide that technical support to the first world. But we also need to talk about the responsibility aspect of it. I mean, for instance, as far as carbon emissions are concerned, which are one of the key reasons of climate change, the largest emitters of carbon greenhouse gases are the developed countries, the first world. And mainly then your multinational corporations, because there's not much emphasis on regulation. As far as the state is concerned, there's not much emphasis on accountability as far as third world countries are concerned. So you see a lot of power with these multinational corporations that they have in the first world. And I think that is what needs to be tweaked within and then in the post-pandemic scenario. So it's more about responsibility than about capability, because they're mainly responsible for the climate change. So you're talking about, say, in Bangladesh, within next few years, I mean, even before pandemic, these were the realities that within next few days, you're talking about, about 50 million people in this particular region, being displaced because of climate change. And mainly those responsible for it have to take the action then.
Absolutely right. And of course, the reason for all these sessions that we keep is to spread awareness and actually raise those points that people are not, maybe looking at. So let's just talk about the opportunities. Let's just include some messages. Our respected chancellor is with us, and she writes, "What are the opportunities which are there with the current situation?" And she also mentioned that please share opportunities for developing countries in specific. So, Dr. Nadeem, your point on that?
You're asking me?
Yes, I'm asking for this question, and the question says, what are the opportunities which are there with the current situation? And for the developing countries, what are the opportunities in specific?
What opportunities developing countries have now?
Now, because of the COVID-19, what opportunities do they have for the future to get back to normal and sustain their economy?
Yeah, I think they need to the opportunity. I don't know whether it's just an opportunity or because that opportunity existed always. What is important now is that in order to harness these global economic forces or the onslaught of transnational companies that Ali Jillani has talked about, you need regional cooperation. And without like ASEAN, like NAFTA, like SARC. Now, the role of SARC becomes very, very important as far as South Asia is concerned, and we need to reconsider our foreign policies. This is very much now linked to regional cooperation. If there is more regional cooperation, we are able to spend more on development. If there's more regional cooperation, we can grow collectively. All countries within the region can grow collectively and can be more competitive in the global market. So that's the key, I think.
Right. Ali, I'll come back to your previous point. You were talking about more responsibility rather than capabilities. We've seen that even in the first world countries, more businesses, more banks, more economic sectors have been shut down as compared to the developing countries. So even the hit on the first world countries is much, much bigger because the stake is much bigger in the first world countries. So how do you look at that?
Omar, I mean, uh, I'm bound to actually go back. I'll also link it with the opportunities question. Uh, I'm bound to go back. I mean, it's not just the opportunity for the developing countries, also for the developed world. If you can spend, say, about 3/4 of $1 trillion on defense, why do you not have a good enough system to cope with this kind of a pandemic? For instance, it's a very small question to the supreme power in the world, right? Uh, as far as the question is concerned, and then bringing it back into the perspective of opportunities, then at the local level, you have this opportunity of tweaking your internal governance in terms of allocation of resources, which should be equitable for human development. It has to be pro people, pro poor governance policies at the internal level. This is your opportunity. At the external level, you need to, like, I mean, the developing countries need to mobilize a collective resolve in terms of debt distress reduction. For instance, we spoke about the IMF debt. These countries, I mean, a huge chunk, for instance, Pakistan, a huge chunk of our GDP goes in debt servicing only, right?
True.
So if you reduce that debt on these developing countries, they will have much more to be able to finance, critical strategic sectors like health, education, and poverty alleviation, for instance, right? And then these developing countries need to also come together, especially at the Asia Pacific level. We've had these discussions on the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. We are talking about a regional entity to combat illicit financing. We're talking about a regional entity to counter these multinational corporations, holding them accountable, to be able to qualify a particular framework for what they call corporate social responsibility, which doesn't exist as we speak, right? So
Right.
we would probably have to reinvent the framework and the conceptualization of the state itself to enable that regulatory lens for the countries, to enable these developing countries to cope better with these multinational corporations and neoliberal maneuvers.
Right.
I would like to interject here. I think more than opportunities, it's a matter of realization. Post-pandemic situation doesn't provide you so many opportunities that we have already missed. We had
Yeah.
more opportunities. The entire world had more opportunities in pre-pandemic, situation, but there was no realization. For example, uh, scientists, policymakers knew about this pandemic, knew about the fact that this pandemic might occur. For example, George Bush in 2005 had mentioned in one of his speeches that the world might see this kind of pandemic. Scientists have been warning, but there was no realization. So it's more an issue of realization, which will come forth through people's pressure, especially pressure of first world taxpayers, because there is hardly any taxpayers in developing countries. And of course, the political realization of and coming forward of political will, some kind of political will of ruling elites here and the upper classes. So it's not an issue of opportunities. We will be having less opportunities now.
Ali, we all know that the situation is tough. It is unknown what future holds. We all have this huge question mark. Even time will tell how things will react. But rather keeping in mind of whatever this things happened in the recent past, uh, what precautions can we take? And if we talk about solutions, so if we talk about Pakistan mainly over here, what do you think Pakistan should look at currently?
Switching from reactive to proactive governance. And it's not just for Pakistan; it's for the entire globe. This is what's been proven by this particular pandemic, that the focus has to shift back to prioritize people And I mean, it's not just the growth fanaticism that we see. It's not just about the economy that should be the stimulus for society's survival. It has to be the people at the center of governance and policy making processes, which should be the focus, not just in Pakistan, also outside.
Right. Dr. Nadeem, your view on this?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Ali, can you please repeat the question?
Sorry?
Can you please repeat the question for Dr. Nadeem?
Yeah, Dr. Saab, I mean, what exactly should countries like Pakistan do now in this situation, and how can we prevent these kind of pandemics moving forward?
Well, I think it, to me, it's absurd to suggest anything to Pakistani establishment. They have their vested interest and what I would suggest is to the people of Pakistan, and I think they need and political parties also, that they need to organize people. I think political parties have more important role here. They need to organize people. They need to organize their political parties. They need to go to the grassroots, to be more accountable to the people. Otherwise, I'm not very optimistic as far as Pakistan is concerned, considering what was going on here and whoever rules, So my message would be to the citizens of Pakistan that it is not necessary, first of all, to turn each and every house into a mosque to be a good Muslim. First of all. Secondly, so there's a difference between respecting religion and becoming orthodox Muslims, which is a major hindrance in creative, has become, this is at least my observation, that has become a major hindrance towards innovation, towards creative thinking, towards thinking beyond the box, Secondly, is, people need to be organized.
Right.
And unless people are organized, they cannot. There won't be any potential, pro people with human face kind of that would emerge. We will still be ruled by what people call in Pakistan establishment. I would say it's military,
Right.
it's military establishment,
Right.
which I don't think is ready to take even a step back as far as their own institutional and vested interests are concerned.
Right. So if we look at it, I think coming from the old conversation, that first we need realization, and every individual on their own, they should step up. They should look at things the way they are. They should realize what they are in and be aware of everything. We'll include some comments, and we have a question here from Manur Faruqi. She asks, can I have a viewpoint over the service industry? Because experts say that it will be one of the sectors affected because of the digitalized system, because people are being led to shift from traditional banking to online banking. So, Ali, you have a very deep eye on all the scenarios. How do you think that service industry will be affected or not? Because in Pakistan, mainly, we are more comfortable with the traditional way of work. And now, since we're forced to come on online, everyone is having a bit of difficult time to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the two sectors of the economy are concerned, like the agriculture and the industrial sector, I see those a little more affected compared to the services sector of the economy, because I think the imperative is to brace the technology moving forward, so that we can basically provide these services in the digital realm also. So you do have that room available there. But as far as your industrial sector is concerned, as far as your agricultural sector is concerned, I mean, they've been hard hit in a way. Plus, there's been this domino effect as far as hospitality sector is concerned. So you have these hotels, you have this tourism sector, that's going to be something which will take quite some time to actually, stand back up again. Omar, I'll just quickly go back to what Dr. Saab alluded. Uh, I think, Dr. Saab, we can afford to be optimistic still, based on the fact that I agree with you. There has not been a lot of realization. There's been a lot of campaigning. You've spent a lifetime doing that. But there have been serious problems in terms of tweaking the policy mindset. But I believe that this particular pandemic, which is why I really like the topic, that it could be a promise for tweaking that particular policy mindset. And people like yourself and me can afford to be a little optimistic in terms of things shifting to the other side. Of course, mobilized by the collective resolve of the people on the ground.
No, look, that would be a kind of normative thinking, and taking in account the current evidence. The situation doesn't seem to be too optimistic. Although I'm not now. Lack of optimism doesn't mean that there's no hope. Hope is always there. But the optimism, but you can't be optimistic. You may have some wishes. So I also wish that something good happens, but seeing even during this the way state is handling and has handled this pandemic, it seems that they are absolutely not bothered about people or their interests at all.
Right. So that's the beauty of it, of course, that how we look at things. And since the conversation is so interesting, I wanted to go on a bit further. But we are short of time, and we do agree to disagree on a lot of things. But the main thing remains that we all should be positive and hope for the best for the future for the entire humanity. And we really hope that things do get better. So, Ali, what
I would
yes,
just add this. We need to be positive, but being positive about something which is negative is insanity. We can't be positive about things which are not positive. What is important is to create a critical mass of people who can think critically with, without being positive. This term positive is such a cliched term that I don't think we need to be positive. I think we need to be critical. So what is more important is that we need to be more and more critical about things instead of being positive and close our eyes.
right. Yes, that then again comes to the realization that we do need to realize that things are tough, and critical analysis, of course, is essential. And of course, we all need both sides of the story. Ali, your views on that?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Saab, as far as the criticality is concerned, but I would rather soften it to pragmatism. You have mixed feelings. We do have to harbor our hopes somewhere, right? So, like Dr. Saab said, I do pretty much believe as far as the people power is concerned, and that's one thing that can turn the tables around still, as far as I'm concerned. It's just about mobilizing that collective resolve based on critical thinking. I concede, plus that general awareness, which this particular show is also a medium of, bringing those critical questions to the table, which have been long forgotten, in the aisles of policy making.
Right. And Ali, you have a very deep eye on the whole scenarios around the socio-economic, socio-political. What would you like to suggest the students right now? Which field should they pursue for, and what career should they, look towards for the future post-pandemic?
I think in the globalized scenario, everybody has these different, channels of communication where you have this continuous education going on. No matter which field you are in, you are relevant to the reality around yourself, right? So everybody has to be. This is one thing that I believe that we need to shift the focus towards. educational establishments around the world have had this focus, especially in Pakistan, that we do not tend to politicize our consciousness in terms of those critical questions. I think it's high time that we started politicizing our consciousness in the right way. I mean, by politics, I mean in terms of that critical thinking Dr. alluded to, by posing those right questions, which also happen to be, say, moral imperatives, long forgotten ideas. We need to bring those back to the table, and then talk about the ideas of equality and justice and human development and whatnot. So these perspectives have to come back. So no matter what field you are in,
I think we've lost Ali's connection for a while. Dr. Nadeem,
from corporations.
right. So, Dr. Nadeem, what would your suggestion be for the students right now, keeping the whole scenario in mind, critically thinking how the students should, pursue their fields and choices right now?
I think the primary gain, goal of students has to gain knowledge, because knowledge is essential to bring any change. Uh, Number one, number two, they need to be sort of aware of what's going on around, in their surrounding and globally. And more importantly, I think there's a very critical role of educational institution to develop certain progressive, forward-looking, liberal, critical thinking. For example, in our universities, this is one of the mission statements that one of the aims of universities here is to create a mass of critical people who can think critically, who have the ability to say, no, we don't want this. We want something else. And we need to sort of contemplate then what that something else has to, how that something else would be manifested in policies, what, different stakeholders within the society need to do to bring that something else. So, unfortunately, in Pakistan, the thinking has become so dogmatic that people are living in their comfort zones. Whether it's religion, whether it's something else. The people, and there has been politics. I would add to what Ali Jillani has said. There has been politics of depoliticizing people. Look at the media. Media 24 hours keep depoliticizing people. You know, there's always, I mean, I don't want to go into detail because we don't have much time. So we have to somehow deal with this very discourse of depoliticization and build counter discourses. This is the role of students, academics, teachers, civil society activists, educational institutions, to offer a counter narrative, to offer a counter discourse to our students and then to the society. I think that is very critical because right now what is more important in countries like Pakistan is awareness. People are not aware of things.
Right.
So creating awareness, sensitizing people about crucial, world affairs, national affairs, what is their role as individuals and as collective. So these are the things which need to be highlighted and role of institutions, especially educational institutions, become very very critical. There's more and more need to do more and more research. There are hardly any research-based institutions in Pakistan. These are only teaching factories.
Right.
So there's more and more need to do more and more research so that we know, this tendency in Pakistan. I mean, I'll share an anecdote. Whenever I come here from my field where I talk to people, especially to those who are educated, they have the sense that they already know everything without doing any research.
Right.
So they take things so for granted. That this is, and many times I've faced sort of ridicule as well. Why are you wasting time doing this research? We already know about it.
Right. So
Fact is that
the hunger should be there to learn more. Ali, you have been a very active person. We even Greenwich University started the research chair project as well. You're a very active member of the ORIC as well. What would you like to say about the whole research Dr. Nadeem stated?
I think I agree with it. I absolutely second that we need to focus on developing that consciousness in our people, which then leads towards the development of that civic infrastructure we're talking about, which is critical, which is politically conscious, which is intellectually responsible. And that is pretty much the emphasis at Karachi Research here. Also, what we try to do is we look into the governance side of things, and try to come up with actionable recommendations for the government. We are doing it not just within Pakistan, but also at the Asia Pacific level, at the Sustainable Development Forum. We are chipping into the process with different recommendations. This regional entity for combating illicit financing and corruption that I spoke about was one of the recommendations of Karachi Research Chair, which was taken on board at the Asia Pacific Forum. Then there's this the high-level political forum of the UN General Assembly, where we also have tabled our recommendations as well. Unfortunately, the session could not be held this particular year because we don't see this going away by July. But the online session for the APFST is due in another few days, and we'll be participating in that as well.
Absolutely right. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'll be including this comment as well. Our Chancellor, Madam Seema Mughal, says that Dr. Nadeem, your association with Greenwich is deep down in many ways conceptual theme of Convocation 2019, logo of Global Institute, and many more. Thank you for being a part of the institution.
no, it's my pleasure, Seemaji. You're always welcome, to engage me, and I'm always there to contribute anything to Greenwich University. I'll just mention one thing. Whatever I was, saying was inspired by the vision of Qaid-e-Azam. Qaid-e-Azam wanted the kind of Pakistan which I was talking about, which unfortunately has unfolded in very strange, very different directions.
Right, and the irony is that when we state the truth, many people taste it as bitter because the fact of the story is we need to be aware, we need our consciousness to get alive because you very rightly stated that when you say that I know everything and there's nothing new to learn, I think that is the beginning of the downfall. So we have to get that straight, of course.
You know, yeah, there's a saying, it's not ignorance, but ignorance of ignorance, which is the death of knowledge. So that's what is happening in Pakistan. People are not aware of their ignorance, and we have to make them aware that you are ignorant, like us. We also are ignorant, and that's why we are in pursuit. But at least we recognize that or our ignorance. So
Right.
recognizing your own ignorance is the key to gaining knowledge.
Right.
Otherwise,
That's the
Right.
distinction that made Socrates the genius he was.
yeah.
Indeed, indeed. And life is a learning stage, and we keep learning on every step of life. And we have to keep ourselves open and not close ended if we want to progress, if we want to grow, and if we want to make this world a better place. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your intellectual insights. It was lovely having you both. And we'll definitely have another session sometime soon. And hopefully, things do get better sooner for the entire world.
Thank you for inviting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Ali. And that was all for today. And we got to learn so much from the two intellectual gentlemen, Dr. Nadeem and Mr. Ali Jillani. We'll definitely have another session regarding this topic. If you have any topic in mind, you can always get back to us through the comments. You can give your feedback. And we'll definitely be back tomorrow with a new guest and a new session. Till then, stay home, stay safe, take care of yourself, and Pakistan Zindabad.